Okay, so we're now at the second session of painting the Modigliani picture. And if you remember last session, we drew the image out and then I showed you how to paint in the flesh colour, flesh being a mixture of white with orange. And then I also showed you how to help create a bit of shadow by putting watery blue around the eyes, down the side of the nose, and then blending it in with water, and also some highlights with touches of red to bring things forward. Warm things bring things forward, cold colours take it away. What we're going to have a look at today is the hair, the eyes and the background. I'm going to start off with the eyes, and quite simply, if you remember when looking at Modigliani's work, some of the eyes were solid colour to give it like a blank expression. Some of the eyes had detail. It is totally up to you as to which sort you're going to do. On mine, I'm going to go for solid colour, and I think I'm going to go for green. Now, as ever, you need to be considering the size of your paintbrush. There's no way you can do a shape that small with a large paintbrush. So I'm going to go with quite a small one. I'm going to get some green paint, and remember these are block paints, so they only go liquid when you add water. Don't add too much water. Keep it quite thick because it will cover the image much better if we do that. So we can look there now. Best advice I can give for painting in a shape is to go round the inside edge first of all with the tip of your paintbrush. So we're going around the inside of that eye shape there, just working with the tip. I say work with the tip because you know exactly where that is then going to on when you're adding the paint onto it. And then once you've done that, you can quite simply just fill that in the middle. So we can work with something like that there, and then we'll just quickly do the one next to it. It's quite a vibrant green, is that actually? Which is quite nice like that. And like I said, I'm just going to leave mine as a solid colour to create a bit more of an unsettling effect, really, isn't it? It's rather odd when you're not looking at the pupils of the eye, etc. So we're going to do that. Now the next bit, the hair. Quite interesting with the hair, because when you look at Modigliani's versions, a lot of his pictures are just solid colour with one or two lines in, so it's not as detailed as if you were doing a real observation one. I'm going to draw your attention in particular to this image here. Now this one is actually quite a detailed painting from Modigliani, but it's quite interesting the way that he's done the lines in the hair, and hopefully you can see those white lines going down there. Now Modigliani didn't paint those white outlines. What he did was he scratched them in. So he'd get the paint, he's using oil paint, which takes a little bit longer to dry. He'd paint in the colour, then he'd turn his paintbrush round, and just using the end of the paintbrush he'd scratch through, and that would take some of the oil paint away and you'd get the canvas showing through it. It's quite a nifty effect of putting detail in like that. We can try and do something similar with the water-based paint. I'm going to use a slightly bigger paintbrush for starters, and I'm going to get a bit of a pool of colour on my paint palette. I don't want it to be too thin, but then again I don't want it to be too thick. I'm going to make it a little bit darker. To make brown a bit darker, you've got a choice. You could add a bit of blue, or if you want to be really quick about it, you can add black. Okay, and you can get that to the colour that you want. Now the thing with this paint is obviously it is going to dry a lot quicker than oil paint. So what I want to do is I'm going to paint one section like so, whilst it's drying, it's a little bit thin that paint, but we should get away with that. Whilst it's drying, I'm then going to turn my paintbrush round and I'm going to put some stripes in. Now it's actually quite interesting when you do it with the water-based paint, because you also, as well as getting a white line, you get quite a dark line as well when you do that. Okay, so just carry on now, just filling that in. Some of you may not like that effect, and you may still want to be thinking, right, well, how am I going to put these lines in here? How am I going to put them in once we've got the main colour on? So what we do there is we let that colour dry, and then when it is dry we can use a thinner paintbrush and we can work into it and just paint some darker lines on. This should be dry enough now, which it is. So you could paint some darker lines on like that. Or, if you wanted to, you could paint some lighter lines on. So working into it with your fine paintbrush like that, and we can paint some lighter lines on there. And that will just indicate the way the hair is growing, etc. Okay. Once, oh, bit of a mess there. How do we get rid of that? We use water. Just get some water on it, spread it out, and that will blend into the rest of it. You can usually fix anything that goes wrong like that. You can usually fix that as you go along. As for the background, now regarding the background, you are going to be deciding how to recreate a mood. So if you want quite a happy, warm mood, think of using warmer colours, oranges, yellows, reds. If you want a more miserable mood, think of using blues, cooler colours, blues, purples, greens. Okay, it is up to you. I'm gonna choose blue for this picture, and what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to paint it a plain blue. But what I want you to see in his work is the backgrounds are never just one pure colour. He works into the backgrounds with black and white to make a much more mottled effect. In fact, in this one he's even used reds into the blue. So first of all, you're just going to put a base colour on there. So as an example, we could get this here. Now I'm using quite a decent size, sounds daft, a decent size small brush to do this. Okay, these are the sort of brushes that I prefer to use rather than the really massive ones. It's up to you again. If you want to use a bigger flat-ended brush, you can do that, but I find I get a much better finish working with these brushes. And what I'm just doing to start with is just very roughly literally slapping the paint on. But once we've got that on there, what I'm then going to do is I'm going to work into the blue to change the tone and the shade that's on here. So we've got that there. Very, very rough to begin with. But once we've got that, and even whilst it's still drying, if you get some black, you can start dabbing on. And what you'll notice, the beauty of working with these block paints, is when you're dabbing it on, whoops, let's not get too carried away. Let's just neaten that off there. That's better. Soon sorted that out there. When you're working into it here, we can get now quite a mottled effect, and you're using, it's rather like it's rather a painterly technique similar to that used by Van Gogh, where he's just putting the brush strokes on and leaving them. And we can also work into it with white. So in some areas we might want it to go lighter. And look how the blue is mixing with the white as you put it on. And you get such an interesting background. I'm even going to put some little bits in here and just blend it in slightly. And you do get a really, really interesting background. If you've done too much, add a bit more blue on there. And that is a much more interesting background than just doing it one colour. You could even consider, when you come up here, and this is something that he's done on this picture here, some of the paintbrush lines sort of follow the shape of the head round. So you could do that on there, just working it round like so, and going round there, and coming down here. And it's a very painterly technique. You don't need to worry too much about making mistakes, etc., because you just get this wonderful textured background. And if we wanted to, we could do a little bit of a Modigliani and add an extra colour in like he's done on this one here. Notice just by brushing it in, you get a much better finish to the quality of the paint that you put on there. Yeah, quite like that. That's coming on quite nicely. So, that's all I'm going to show you in this session. So just remember, once you've got your face colour on, eyes, hair, and then working into the background. Next week, or next session should I say, I'll show you how to finish it off and put the fine finishing touches into your picture. Okay?